When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Franz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. You understand me? I was born black, I live black, and I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
Uhuru, welcome to Uhuru Mindset. It's Ikemba, Feist, and Christine. This is Revolutionary Conversations for Revolutionary Times. This show is brought to you by the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, or MPDM for short. I want to acknowledge our president, Columbayi Antoinette, who is currently running for alderperson of Ward 3 in St. Louis, as well as the founder and the leader of the Uhuru Movement, Chairman Amali Yeshitela. Uhuru means freedom in Swahili and is the conceptual basis for which we organize and develop African or Black controlled institutions, in addition to resisting the colonial system that has been designed to subject us to a perpetual state of subjugation. Uhuru Mindset is meant to raise our consciousness to our identity and function of colonialism in our daily lives, in ways that we can transcend systems of oppression and exploitation. Our show will consist of interviews with ordinary people from our community to discuss past and present ways colonialism affected them and their community and what we can do to transform our conditions. Colonialism is a system in which one group directly or indirectly controls the politics and economics of another group. This has traditionally been done by settlement from the colonizer. Today, colonialism can be exercised through indirect rule or neo-colonialism. We plan to bring dynamic and stimulating discussions to our viewers and represent an alternative to culture vultures and opportunists who have no intention on bringing practical solutions to our problems. This show is for the African or Black working class and poor. This show represents your interests and will tell your story. All right. Let's get started. Uhuru, I am Ikemba. I'm here with Feist, Christine, and Whisper and Win. Welcome to another episode of Uhuru Mindset. Uhuru Mindset is brought to you by the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, or MPDM for short. I wanted to acknowledge our president, Columbayi Antoinette, holding us down out in St. Louis, Missouri, who just fought a hard battle for alderperson in Ward 3. She fell short of unseating the incumbent, but she did gain around 40% of the vote while putting revolution and Black power on her platform. If anything, she showed us that the community is becoming more and more conscious of what and who is the problem. So I definitely want to just give a shout out to our president. I want to also acknowledge the chairman of the Uhuru movement, Amali Yeshitela, who has been fighting for the right of African people to be self-determined, to be a self-determined people since the 1960s. This is Uhuru Mindset. We say Uhuru because Uhuru means freedom. This was the call of the Kikuyu people of Kenya during colonialism. Kenya came under the rule of the British shortly after the Berlin Conference of 1884-85. Kenyans became victims of violence and dispossession. British consolidated control over Kenyan land and encouraged Kenyans to become wage laborers. The Kenyan group known as the Mau Mau rebelled, and the Uhuru became their battle cry. The colonizers of Europe and America became afraid of the rise of the Mau Mau in their colonies. Our organization fights in the spirit of the Mau Mau. This is why we say Uhuru, because until we have secured the power to self-determination as a people, we will be in a Uhuru mindset. This show was created to address the differences or the different experiences we have as African people living under colonial conditions, but have conversations about the way forward in order to overturn the contradictions that exist within society. Welcome everyone to Uhuru Mindset. I hope you enjoy our discussion. But right now, you know how we do on Uhuru Mindset. We're going to play a selection. Let's get into it.
Yahweh. I know you hear me, Yahweh. I know you feel me, Yahweh. When my heart is empty, oh God, dear God, forgive me, Yahweh. I know you're watching me, Yahweh. Sometimes I need you, Yahweh. At all times I need you. Just know I love you, Yahweh. But I fall short sometimes. I fall short sometimes. You know you did your thing when you made me. Even though this world drive me crazy. Seen it all, though my left eye lazy. Staring at 30 with no babies. Can't say this world ain't changed me. It's crazy. The world lying in the power of the wicked. Most people know, but they never would admit it. Read about Babylon, now I'm living in it. Now I'm living in it all. Now we 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 living in it. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh.
Right. That was to get everybody soul ready. Get everybody. Oh, I'm sorry.
That was an amazing musical selection as usual, and I knew you was gonna freestyle. That was beautiful though. But Uhuru, everybody. Peace and love to all the guests and attendees. I give thanks for everyone joining. It wouldn't be the same without you. We appreciate coming on to share your energy with us and to contribute to the conversation. The title of tonight's show is Gentrification is Genocide. We do have a very special guest that we will soon give a proper introduction. But first, I'm going to give the definition of gentrification. The dictionary definition is the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. So that's the definition of gentrification. I'll say it again. The definition of gentrification is the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing, attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. So now I'm going to read the resolution. So this is the resolution, and excuse me, I'm gonna read it from my phone. I don't know it by heart. This is the resolution from the Northern Region Black Power Summit. It was held January 24th of this year, 2021. Whereas gentrification is a process in which working class communities are overrun by affluent communities. Whereas the origins of the term gentrification is the word gentry, meaning people born of noble birth. Very interesting. Whereas colonial capitalism has created a global white gentry and an African underclass. Gentrification is a modern analogy for the historical assault on Africa, African countries internationally, and African people. Whereas gentrification is a process of urban removal and counterinsurgency. Whereas the unhousing of African families enforces on Africans genocidal conditions, gentrification and unhousing of Africans leads to increased illness and death, horizontal violence, increased African child mortality, and the theft of African children from African families by the colonial state. Whereas gentrification is also a process of neocolonialism. The African petty bourgeoisie have played a vital role in the advancement of gentrification, the theft of African communities. Neocolonialism is white power and blackface. Whereas the fight against gentrification is a way to organize the African working class in the anti-colonial struggle for African liberation. Ashe, Uhuru.
Hey, Empress, thank you for giving us a definition and going over that resolution. Appreciate that. I think we're going to have a dynamic discussion today, though. We have a special guest with us, Mr. Ty. And I say special guest because from what I've heard about Mr. Ty, this is someone who is active in this community, someone who's not just like sitting back and watching, talking about the problem. He sees the problem, he sees the issue, and he's trying to handle it in the best way that he believes that it can be handled. So I had a conversation with Mr. Ty earlier. We was discussing gentrification. We had a great conversation, and from what I heard about you and the conversation that I had with you, I think you have a lot to offer to this discussion. And so when we think about gentrification, a lot of us, and we talked about it earlier, a lot of us think about white people coming into the community, displacing the Black community. And you said, like, over the last year or so, your ideas, or perception of gentrification has evolved. And so I would like you to, well, first introduce yourself to our audience, and then talk about your perception of gentrification. What does that mean to you?
Oh, first I'd like to say thank you for having me on. And I'm really happy to be here. And over the past year, and actually over the past 10 years, my perception and idea of gentrification and what gentrification is or was has evolved. So as a young man, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and that is a totally different environment, totally different people. And when I moved to New York, it changed yet again. But when the people started talking to me about gentrification, my perception or my idea of what gentrification meant was very closed. To me, I followed what everyone thought. It means that white people move in and take over and push us out. Here recently, I learned to discuss and evolve more focused on what that means. It doesn't necessarily mean Black and white. We are so accustomed to saying it's Black and white, but it can be Black on Black, it can be Black and white, it can be Black and Hispanic. It's more about economics and dollars than it is about the color of people's skin. As I'm a resident leader of public housing, and I see a lot of what we would technically say was gentrification, but it's really, we have to expand what those four corners are. So if you take a group of people who are historically, say, making under 10,000, and all of a sudden a bunch of people move in of the same skin tone and race and background, but they make $35, $45, $50,000, their expectation level is higher than what people who make 10,000 are. People who make 10,000 go into the grocery store and they may look at a $5 loaf of bread, but that's basically what they do is look at it. They are more likely to purchase the $1 or the $2 loaf of bread because it's in their economic range. A person who makes 50,000 or more may look at the dollar loaf of bread and say, "Oh no, I don't want that. That's not good quality." But they and go towards the $5 loaf of bread. If you look at when we talk about food disparities and food deserts in our communities, look at what does that really mean? Does that mean that we don't have food? No, it means that some group of people decided that this was the type of food that we should be having and focusing on. So because we don't want or have that particular food in our area, we are a food desert. And if you look at that, where I live in Brooklyn is in Clinton Hills. So everything is Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, that class of grocery stores. If you look at further out, Flatbush, where you have a very heavy, culturally heavy West Indian community, they pride things on natural foods and they pride on fresh groceries. You don't.
Could I stop you there? Ask another question. Yeah. I used to live in Clinton Hills, so this is interesting. So we, I'm familiar with the terrain as well. So Clinton Hills has changed a lot. That was a predominantly Black community, I remember at one time, right? Do you go back that far in Clinton Hills?
Yes. Okay. And they used to call it Miracle Mile and everything. And what has happened geographically is people have discovered they can get more money for the same property. So all those brownstones, and the government aids in this. Remember when the government had the program, you could buy a brownstone for $1 if you could prove that you had money to fix it up and you couldn't sell it or do anything for 10 years. So that's when you begin to see the shift. A lot of people started saying, "Oh no, I have the dollar, but I don't have the money to prove that I can spend the next 10 years fixing it up." And so you start to have a shift in dynamics. And when you start to have the shift in geography like that, a lot of people might say, "Oh, well, that was the beginning of gentrification." I don't know necessarily if I want to call it gentrification, but certainly I feel that because we were not able to take full advantage of the buy the brownstone for $1 program, it put us at a disadvantage.
Why wasn't we able to take advantage of that program? What do you think?
I think it comes down to dollars. So the outline of the program was if you could find a dilapidated broken down brownstone, and at that time I lived on Gates in Washington, right on that corner, 92 Gates. So that next block across from the Brooklyn Public Library there was all dilapidated, broken down brownstones. You could purchase one of those brownstones for $1. The catch was you had to be able to prove that you had the money to spend the next 10 years fixing that brownstone up and bringing it up to a livable state. You were legislated that you could not do anything with that brownstone for 10 years. And this wasn't just in Brooklyn, it was also in Washington where I had grown up, and a lot of places, mainly in the North that people could buy these brownstones for $1. But the catch was, do you have the money to prove that you can rehabilitate that brownstone? And the problem was at that time, it was the only thing that was really hot in Clinton Hills at that time was Miracle Mile. That's when you had the celebrities living there. You had Spike Lee buying the firehouse, and you had the lady who opened up the cosmetic line, and she had shop on Myrtle Avenue. So you had some great things happening, but you also had some things that were happening that economically held us back.
Yeah, I appreciate you speaking on this and giving us that history. You know, when you talk about the dollar homes, you have something similar to that happening today, where a lot of these buildings are being sold for $1 to wealthy people, to rich people who can buy it like 100 times, 1,000 times over, really, if they wanted to. But they're able to secure these buildings for $1 from Philadelphia to New York to St. Louis. So in different areas, and these areas
is on the tail end. The catch
say
is
that
on
again.
the catch is on the tail end.
Yeah.
How they catch you is on the tail end. You said it. They can buy it over. It's not the fact of buying it for $1. It's
what
the
they can
fact
do
that
after.
you have money to fix it up and hold on to it. Can you meet that requirement to hold on to it for 10 years? That's
Absolutely.
where a lot of us fall behind. A lot of us don't, and that creates what we now call gentrification. So
we getting to it now. Hold on, Mr. Ty. Hold on, we getting to it now. You said the magic word, gentrification. So let me just see if anybody had a question or a comment for you. Emperor Spice Whisper, is there anything that y'all want to address Mr. Ty about?
You greetings, Mr. Ty again. You mentioned something about like having certain foods available in certain neighborhoods. You were saying, you know, $1 loaf of bread may not suffice or be seen as a quality to someone making a certain amount of money or income annually. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because you know, in our neighborhoods, we have very unhealthy foods. We don't have quality produce. We have all of the unhealthy stuff like pizza, Kennedy Fried Chicken, and things like that.
Who told you? Who institutionalized you to believe that the food is unhealthy? Someone implanted. Okay, I grew up in Washington, and like I said, my mother made pig feet. My mother made pork chops. Somewhere in between me getting out of high school and becoming adult, someone said pork is not good for you anymore. You should not eat pork. And so now we have this whole thing. Oh, I don't swine and dine. When I was a teen, that was the catch. I don't swine and dine. You ask someone in the North primarily, and they will tell you, oh no, I make my collard greens or I make my callaloo now with smoked turkey. I don't swine and dine. But I would argue that, okay, it's your preference that you don't want to eat pork, but don't demean the people who do, because all those people who grew up in the South and are still growing up in the South, they grew up on pork. Pork sustained us as a people for a long time when there was nothing else available. When the master said, throw out those pork bones or whatever, that's what we had to eat. And now we have cultural pockets. So if you go into a neighborhood that's primarily West Indian, overwhelmingly West Indian, what culturally, what are they attracted to in terms of eating? They much more into natural foods than traditional Blacks are. Right? They are into traditional foods, the whole smoothie craze, the whole vitamins. if you look at what they eat, the oxtails, the rice, there are certain things that are culturally attractive to a certain class of people, or class is the wrong word.
But Mr. Todd,
Yeah.
just to struggle with you on that, because I think what Empress was getting at is that the foods, the quality of food though, in the Black communities, like these low income working class communities, the food is of low quality. And so I think you even addressed it yourself. You were talking about how, sort of like food deserts, right? And I think there's different descriptions of what a food desert is too, but I think you're saying that a food desert is when you have an area where you have to travel for a long time to find some good quality food.
Because we don't demand it. We don't demand it. When you go into the store, if you go in the store, what are you attracted to? What do you walk up to? Do you just walk up to whatever's on sale?
But doesn't it cost more though?
It costs more because we are willing to pay more. We are willing to pay more, and that's proven by the shift in food prices each week. Milk this week is 99 cents. For some reason, day after tomorrow, milk goes up to $4. And it's the same milk, it's the same company, it's the same store, but somehow we're willing to accept that the store raised the price. Let's take sneakers, for example. You can go into a store and buy a pair of sneakers that are $7.99, or you can go in and buy a pair of sneakers that are $300. If you look at the course, 30 days in a month, people walk in the store, and not necessarily people that can afford to buy $300 sneakers. They go straight to the $300 counter and bypass the $7.99. And the $7.99 may be of better quality, but the $300 is the perceived better quality because it's Nike, because it's Michael Jordan. It's the same sneaker. As a teenager, I worked in one of these factories, and that makes, what was it? It was corn or something we made and put in the can. It was the same corn we put in the cans, and we just put a different label on. Everything that went to the left, we put a Del Monte label on. Everything that went to the right side of the machine, we put the discount label on.
Mr. Todd, so Mr. Todd, I'm really enjoying this conversation. We're gonna go to announcements and come back. Like, you really dropping a lot on this. There's people asking questions in the chat right now. So we're gonna go to announcements, and then we'll come back and we're gonna pick up where we left off at. All right.
Uhuru family, I have some church announcements. Make sure that you mark your calendars now and make yourself available for April 24th for the virtual One Africa, One Nation Marketplace. It will be taking place between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. Again, that's April 24th. That is a Saturday. Mark your calendars now for the One Africa, One Nation Marketplace. The next announcement is we would like you to tune in, if you'd like, every Sunday for O'Malley Taught Me. That takes place every Sunday on Facebook at 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, O'Malley Taught Me every Sunday on Facebook at 8 p.m. Eastern. Come through to get your political education, your Sunday study on African internationalism. And again, that's on Facebook every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And, you can come, get some knowledge on everything that we talk about here and about African internationalism, like I said. The third announcement I have is that please subscribe to the Burning Spear newspaper. It's very educational, and you can find that at burningspearmarketplace.com. We will have the link in the chat and in the description box. Again, that's burningspearmarketplace.com. Make sure you subscribe to the newspaper. Mark your calendars for our Africans Charge Genocide Town Hall meeting. That will be taking place in Brooklyn, New York on May 1st, 2021. That is a Saturday. Gentrification is genocide is the discussion topic. Genocide is a deliberate and systematic extermination through murder and terror of a national group by the forces of white power's parasitic capitalism. Again, mark your calendars for May 1st. We will be having a town hall meeting in Brooklyn, New York, and that'll be Saturday, May 1st at the Magnolia Tree Earth Center. Next, I challenge everyone to go to mpdom.org and get yourself a membership. We have different levels. It is a powerful, powerful thing to do to speak truth to power and also to join a revolutionary organization. You can do that at mpdom.org. That link will also be in the description box and in the chat. Last but not least, I absolutely want to urge everyone, if you would like and if you care, to donate to our PayPal account. It is nyc.mpdom@gmail.com. The link will be in the description box and in the chat. We also have Cash App, $NPDOM NYC. Again, that's $NPDOM NYC. You can send your donation via PayPal or Cash App. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you for those announcements. So yeah, we want to come back to this discussion. Our topic today is gentrification is genocide. The reason why we say that though is because gentrification, I feel like, is a pretty word, right? That's used to describe the displacement of a group of people. When I think of gentrification, you could have called settler colonialism gentrification. And so when I look at, I talked about the Mau Mau earlier, and the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya had a lot to do with the land, them being dispossessed from their land. So there was violence perpetrated against the Kenyan people. They were being displaced. Their land was being taken, and then they were told to work they were forced to take on wage labor to work as wage laborers. So on the very land that was theirs, right? So, it's a serious contradiction. That's why they rebelled. And so, the question is always, as Malcolm said, like, land is the basis of freedom. And so, we have this struggle that's taking place right here in America. And, with gentrification taking place, I know you can argue that there's some benefits, and I mean, you can raise those things. But I guess, like, I'm coming from a position of those people who are living in those communities, and the cost of living is becoming too high for them. They're becoming displaced. They have to move and so forth. So I want to pick it up and and just get your thoughts about that, because I know you had mentioned class as well. You said it's not just color, and I think I can unite with that. I think class is a serious question to address when we talk about gentrification, because it's not just white people, Asian, Indians, is all types of people, but it has a class component to it. But yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you. First of all, I want to backtrack a little. I don't necessarily like the word class, because class somehow denotes or signifies that someone is better than someone. So it's not class. I think it's more about economics or culture or community. I see one of the questions in the chat. The person was asking, why don't we grow our own food? That is something that's about culture and community. Absolutely, that's culture and community. Some of us feel that, why would I want to waste time growing anything? That's not what I do. And I think that's because culturally, they have not grown up with that in their life. Whispering Wind and I discussed this a lot, that we could do herb gardens, and we can do different types of gardens of our own, but that's more popular with people who come from a background like down south, where they're accustomed to going outside and picking something fresh and bringing it in. The same thing with communities that come from the Caribbean. They are accustomed to going out and accessing those things. And I think all of this plays into this whole thing that we want to call gentrification. When we do it on a limited basis in a limited area, the results is somewhat different than when we do it on a wider scale across, like, say, the whole Brooklyn, instead of we were talking about Clinton Hills. What we would tolerate or expect or accept in Clinton Hills is quite different from what they would say or expect in, say, Brownsville. And that plays into this whole question. But the one thing that does not change is the fact that we need to start standing up for ourselves. When we let different cultures and classes and ideas come into our communities and change our communities, that's a problem, because they come in and they do eventually displace us or move us or lessen us in our own house. You know, it's your house. How can I come in your house and tell you what you're going to cook, where you're going to cook it, and at what time I expect you to cook it? And it also changes a lot of dynamics, like policing. We used to stand out on the corner at 11, 12 at night. All of a sudden now, these so-called rich people, rich upper class people, if you want to say, come in, and they make the decision that everybody should go to bed at 9 o'clock. So I'm going to start calling the police and complaining to the police that these people should not be outside standing on the corner at 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock at night, the corner should be empty. There should be no one outside. And eventually, over time, that becomes the standard in that community. And unfortunately,
Mr. Todd, hey, you just said something that I want to respond to, because it makes me think. I'm sorry, I'm a historian, you know, we talk about this. So I'm just thinking about, like, this is what happens. Again, it wasn't called gentrification when the colonists came to the Americas. But if you think about the English colonies, they settled here. They settled amongst indigenous people. They traded with them. They had a sort of, like, I guess you could say, a quote unquote benign relationship with the indigenous people. But they began to force the indigenous people to adapt their way of life. And if not, they exterminated them or pushed them off of their land. And so, today it is not as, I guess you could say, it's blatant. The taking of the land isn't as blatant as it was then. But I feel like it's the same. It's just a different form of displacement that's taking place. Same thing. It's just dressed up nice and called.
It's the second or third generation of displacement. In the beginning, you're right. In the beginning, it was the first generation, and they had it to do it one way. Now we have laws and legislation, and it's the second generation of displacement. They just can't come and take it or run you away, because now we have laws. Then the third generation of displacement comes, and now it has to be done totally different. And I mean, if you look at the fourth generation of displacement, bringing in housing, there's a housing crisis. So what do? We say we want to invent RAD, we want to make PAC, we want to make all these different programs that basically privatize. The rich people keep getting rich, the poor people keep getting pushed down further and further and displaced out of their housing. So the communities are changing. And as you said, it becomes legal displacement. The laws change to tell you how to live, when to live, at what time to live, where you live. And that until we stand up and say, I'm not going to have this, we're not going to have this, it's going to keep going. And that becomes why you have this new class of leadership that they call the progressives. But are we really progressing or changing or doing anything to move us forward? I mean, I like a lot of what I hear about progressive politics, but then in a lot of ways, it sounds like they're selling us out for a lot of things.
Oh, you touched on several things. I definitely like to bring some awareness upon. One, in terms of the food, I can speak on this because I actually have a relationship with one of the vendors who actually owns Seatown. And what I found out is that in order to bring healthy foods into a low income community, he actually has to pay more for it. And he was looking for other vendors because in our communities, you know, or communities where considered low income, because there's an expectation that you won't spend the money on the the healthier bread, the one that's cost more because it's organic and has less like dough conditioners or whatever, or it's because completely natural, whatever. There's
The
expectation.
the tax credit he gets for us is astronomical. You know, you and I go to the same store, and the tax credits in this state, in this country, have hurt us equally as much as gentrification has. There's always a way for them to give rich people more for helping what they say are the people who don't have.
I was just saying that initially, in terms of the vendors, they have to pay more. So one of the conversations we had was he was trying to find outside vendors because there's actually red tape around that, because in our communities, there is a charge to it. And the answer in terms of you growing food, there is an answer in that, because I'm actually working on a project right now. But what I really want to bring awareness was exactly what you said about how we don't do things anymore in terms of just outright doing it. Now it's law and legislation, because right now I feel like we're facing one of the biggest regentrifications ever, with the whole reorganization of NYCHA, with the plan to either give it to a corporation for management or put it in a trust, because that first idea of placing the condos in the middle of the open spaces got shut down. And I'd like to bring more awareness about that. And how do you feel about that? I'd like you to speak on that, about the plan for NYCHA.
Yeah, I think the blueprint for change, and the trust and the RAD and the PAC, all of it is exactly the same, just they packaging it different. But at the end of the day, we own nothing, we have gained nothing, and we are being displaced. Any way you look at it, all of those, different words to say it's the one pair of blue shoes. You can call them light blue, dark blue, Asian blue, whatever kind of blue you want to call it. At the end of the day, they're still a pair of blue shoes. And it's
Mr. Ty.
Yes.
You just said something very interesting. You said that we own nothing. So when you finish your thought, I didn't mean to cut you off, but before I lost it, I want you to speak about, since we don't own anything, what do you suggest we do to be on the path of ownership to avoid being displaced from our communities?
Okay. We need to stop being afraid to own stuff. There is a colony of people down in the South that bought land. They grouped together and bought land. They bought their building and they're starting their own city. We could do that the same here. There are provisions in the HUD regulations that allow us to become resident-owned managed corporations, meaning that we can band together and buy our building and run our buildings. But the problem becomes, if you have 100 families in the building and you have 95 families that say, yes, I'm willing to buy my apartment, and you have 5 that say, no, I don't want to buy my apartment, the deal is dead, because under legislation, you can't just put those people out and you can't force them to transfer. So we need to start enforcing and coming together as a group to buy and own our own places. There are buildings and there are properties that we would rather take the buyout. We would rather sell out. The landlord comes to us, I'll take the little 10,000 that he's going to give me and I'll move out. Rather than say, no, I'm going to band together. And Whispering Wind and I have discussed this before. We need to own. You can't tell someone else what to do with their property. If you own it, You can make the rules and regulations of what goes and how we're going to proceed. But you have so many people with different ideas, and coming together on an idea becomes very, very difficult, especially when you're talking about that many groups of families. And then there's the question of if people can afford it. So people have to be willing to find a way and make a way. One thing as a people, historically, we have always made a way out of no way. Today, I would challenge you. I always say we're living in the richest generation of our people. They're the richest. They make the most money, but they're the dumbest. I always say they're the dumbest. All these rappers and TV stars and athletes and everything are the richest that we as a people have ever had. There's never been a generation of us that have made more money, but they don't reinvest it or do anything to turn around and help us as a people. You do have sporadic people here and there that buy things, that build housing, that do different things, but not to the level that we're ever going to progress as a people. So I think
Mr.
that,
Todd,
yeah.
On that point right there, when you talk about these people with all of this, with all of these resources and money, it made me think about, a few things. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, when he talked about the miseducation of the Negro, I think like the very education and training that that we are receiving, it's, I wouldn't even say that, it's we're supposed to do. This is what we're doing, exactly what we're supposed to do in this system, which is make this money and give it back to the people who are in positions of power in this country. So, it's a system designed to maintain or sustain, the power structure. So I think like that has a lot to do with it, because you have people like, once again, people with all of this wealth. You have all of these people, Dr. Amison Wilson, he talks about, you have all of these people with MBAs, these Black people get MBAs, but in our communities, we don't have Black-owned businesses. Like, so why is that? So, I think our very education is.
I think we have Black-owned businesses. We don't have Black-owned businesses here.
Yeah, not in our community.
Here in our community, if you look overwhelmingly and look at the magazines and newspapers and news shows you've seen over the last year, think about it. All of these rich people, they have all this money, and what do? They say, I'm opening a school in Brazil. I'm opening a school in somewhere else. But none of them say, I'm opening a school in Detroit. I'm opening a school right here in Brooklyn. That's where the resources are needed. Somehow we forget about right here where we live, and we try to help people in other places to the detriment of our own. How many people, we complain about grocery stores and markets in Brooklyn or in Harlem? How many of them have opened up? I'll give you an example. Was the best use of money to open the Magic Johnson Theater in Harlem? If you had a choice or a need, would it have been the Magic Johnson Supermarket, the Magic Johnson Hospital, or the Magic Johnson Movie Theater? And that's
a great point.
That becomes the questions that we don't want to face. As a people, we don't want to face that question. We always think of some reason to avoid that type of conversation. Whispering Wind, since we've been neighbors, has always talked to me about this whole idea of the food co-op, producing and growing our own food. But if you don't have other people in the community that buy into that, it's just an idea. And what now, look what happened. Niger, the government said, we're gonna start opening farms on NYCHA land. Well, Whispering Wind was talking about that way before it was something to do for NYCHA, but now at Red Hook, at several developments, you have these farms right in the middle of a NYCHA development. But that idea started out with NYCHA residents. NYCHA residents, and just in our community, we need to follow through with ideas.
Mr. Ty, this is a great discussion. Hey, we're gonna close it out, but and open it up for people who may have some questions for you or some comments. But before we do that, is there any like final thoughts that you would like to give people who are viewing?
I would like to probably end with addressing this housing crisis. So in New York, period, there is a housing crisis. I'm not going to say whose because it affects everyone. Rich people can't find a place to live. Middle income can't find a place to live. And those on the end of the pole definitely can't find a place to live. Until we all start addressing the things and the situations that are driving all of us out of our homes, and we want to say, oh, it's gentrification, they're putting me out of my neighborhood, we need to come together and think about that. Not homeowners versus apartments, Black versus white, Black versus Puerto Rican, African American versus American American. It's just so many things that we can come up with as divisions, but we don't do enough to come together as people. There are far too many buildings sitting around that are dilapidated and falling that we could come together as a group and buy that building and have a place to own. Going back to what Empress Livewire said, we need to start owning more. We need to own our grocery stores. We need to, if you look at the Hasidic community, they have their own buses, their own stores, and they do not come in your store unless it's a crisis. They will go in their store and spend their money in their own community. We need to start doing the same. If you put two stores side by side in our community, put a minority-owned store and put Gucci there, people will flock into Gucci and spend all three of their stimulus checks to get one bag, but they won't go in and buy a bag of peanuts from the minority community-owned store right there beside it. But on that, I want to say thank you, and I'd like to see us come together and own more. Don't let people come in our community and take it over. We need to take ownership of our own community.
Hey, Uhuru to that. Uhuru to that.
Uhuru.
So, hey, at this time, Feist, bring us home. Uhuru.
Hey, Uhuru, everybody. I want to thank Mr. Ty for joining us on this particular episode of Uhuru Mindset. Uhuru, President of Canva, comrades Whispering Wind, and comrade Empress Livewire. Uhuru, and I'd like to thank all the people that are participating in this show right now. I want to give a salute to the chairman, Amalia Shatella, founder of the African People's Socialist Party, founder of the Uhuru Movement, and also the international president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, Columbayi and the Net. We're part of an organization that has been in existence since 1972. And our guest, Mr. Ty, he spoke about, his history and many things that have happened, decades long ago. And we are, a member of a movement that is geared at defending the rights of African people all around the world. And we also stand in solidarity with all oppressed people around the world, because we are clear that this land was stolen from the indigenous people who were here before the European colonizers came, the settler colonizers came. And, African people were kidnapped from Africa and brought to America to build the wealth which it sits upon till this day. Its penitentiary system and its genocide and colonialism against African peoples, what fuels the wealth of America. And our organization, I said, has been around for a while, and we have our own newspaper, our own media, the Burning Spear newspaper. And I want to read a little excerpt from one of our articles that was dated from March 30th, 2009, and it's the title is "The Parasite is Dying." I'll put the link in the chat and have it in so everybody can check out the whole thing. But it pretty much says in this portion, the predatory bankers and the media are trying to pin the blame for the current crisis on the collapse of the subprime mortgage industry in 2007. Subprime mortgages are adjustable rate loans that start out with low interest rates that increase by double or more after the initial teaser period. Subprime loans are not new. They are old-fashioned predatory mortgages repackaged as quote-unquote creative lending. Subprime mortgages are supposedly for home buyers who lack quote-unquote prime or good credit, but in fact, African and Mexican communities were targeted regardless of the credit rating or income of the borrower. In the 1990s, under the Clinton administration, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, lending guidelines were changed to permit the predatory subprime mortgages, specifically to target African and Mexican communities. African home buyers were often told by the lenders that subprime interest rates were adjustable. Wall Street bankers participated in a scheme initiated by US President Barack Obama's finance chair, the billionaire broker Penny Pritzker, to use quote-unquote bundles of subprime loans as investment tools in investment funds. And I'm gonna stop reading it there. And I want to say that there was a time where there was wealth being built in the Black community through home ownership. So much so that a lot of Black families would send their children to school using their homes as equity. So I know Mr. Todd spoke something about that we didn't own anything, but we have a history of owning quite a lot, even right out of the Reconstruction period where because of segregation, we had no choice but to rely on ourselves and build our own communities. The most famous of which everybody knows is Black Wall Street, where everything was Black, the banks and the rest of it. Well, what happened to Black Wall Street? It was destroyed. And many of the other self-sufficient surviving Black communities, like in Rosewood and many other places, met the same fate because we weren't politically organized, And the thing about gentrification, like we spoke about it in the beginning of this, taping of Uhuru Mindset, a colonizer is going to educate us to think like the colonizer. So when it comes to food choices, when it comes to how we spend our resources, and what we do with the education that we get, how do we go back into our community and build our communities? And colonialism is something that splits African people, Black people apart, and it makes us susceptible to be attacked by these bankers, the lenders, the white ruling class in general. And on a Uhuru mindset, Uhuru means freedom, everybody. And to have that freedom mindset, to have that unity, is to be clear that, African resistance is in our blood. Even to this day, we're always resisting oppression. And even with the food desert conversation we had earlier, I can see a note. I was just in the Pink Houses the other week, and I saw they have a community garden right there in the housing buildings, many other places in Brooklyn. So I see people establishing things to fight back against gentrification and food deserts and the rest of it. I'm from Jamaica, Queens, New York, and I came into organizer work when Sean Bell was murdered, right there in Queens, right by the LIRRR, where they just put millions and millions of dollars into making an air train to go from the LIRRR hub to JFK, to make it easier for, people coming into town to get around, and at the same time seeing the community go down in such a way, but there's never any resources for anything the community wants. I've been to the community board meetings, and there's never no resources, but they always got money for a new city that they pretty much put on the West Side Highway. Right now, if you go down there, you see a whole new train system. Hudson Yards Project is what it's called. When they want to build a new stadium, they find resources to build that stadium from what they call super funds, but taxpayer dollars. And all these different things are used to benefit the white community, and meanwhile leaves the Black community barren, and I want to say that, our organization, and I know there's other organizations as well that are doing the work to change these conditions. and there's resistance and there's a fight back happening that everybody can participate in. And we do this show, Uhuru Mindset, you know, again, to change the narrative from a colonial mindset. But what is very clear is that nobody's gonna do this work for us but us. We have to be our own liberators. And that's something I appreciate being part of these discussions and conversations. I do know about the work that you do in the community, Mr. Ty, and there's many others. Again, like I would say within our organization that are doing the work to change the contradictions in our community so that we can't be targeted, whether it's subprime mortgage lending or gentrification, where they make the cost of living so hard that people can't live in a community that they've been in for years. And with this whole pandemic, as they categorize it, which we call the colonial virus, because you would see Black people suffering the most in terms of healthcare and homelessness and the rest of it. That's been something that's been plaguing our community before COVID-19 came. And with the advent of COVID-19, it pretty much exposed what they call this disparities. But that, again, is colonialism. That is the colonial attack that's been happening on Black folks in this country and anywhere with African people all around the world. And the only way is to change any of those contradictions from happening is to build a unity that's necessary for us to come together, like many of our guests have said in our chat. And, you know, having a Uhuru mindset, the freedom mindset would change that construct, would get us to be in a position to stop gentrification from happening and bring our people back into political life so that we have to suffer the way we do. And again, I want to thank you for joining us, Mr. Ty. And, you know, I want everybody to go check out npdom.org, join the organization. Let's get it defending the democratic rights of African people in the U.S. We've been fighting back. We won't stop fighting. Many of our political prisoners are in jail right now for doing this very same thing that we're talking about, 20, 30, 40 years. Mr. Ty's beautiful background, and that's cool, but that's Havana. And that's a place that has some of the great healthcare in the world and some of the greatest education in the world. And that's because they severed the colonial relationship between Cuba and the United States government, you know, and the United States government is continually trying to punish Cuba for daring to be self-sufficient, for daring to challenge colonialism. And that's what we do in Uhuru Mindset. We challenge colonialism. We're going to defeat colonialism, and we're defeating it right now. That's the Uhuru Mindset, Uhuru.
Hey, Uhuru. And I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in for another hour of Black Power. And until next time, stay in the Uhuru state of mind. Uhuru.
You know, this is Uhuru Mindset. This is our program. And we appreciate everyone for tuning in and, you know, joining this discussion. We're going to continue to have these discussions. We're going to continue to engage with the community and create Uhuru mindsets wherever you are. So continue to tune into our program. Uhuru.